Not long ago, an 18-year-old professional athlete was on the road with his team. He ordered a sandwich for one of his meals. Soon afterward, he began feeling sick, with a fever, stomach pain, nausea, and diarrhea. Over the next few weeks, he visited the hospital multiple times. Each time, doctors were baffled. Test after test came back normal. Finally, the team doctor ordered a colonoscopy and discovered the problem. What do you think made this young athlete so sick? You got it. Did you notice the toothpick in the athlete's sandwich? He sure didn't. Toothpicks can be helpful in keeping food from falling apart, but if they're not obvious, they can become a dangerous physical hazard. During the young man's colonoscopy, his doctors were astounded to find the 3-inch wooden toothpick lodged in the athlete's intestine. When they removed it, he started bleeding from a damaged artery. Doctors rushed to repair the injury in time. Luckily, the athlete survived. As a food worker, it's part of your job to prevent food hazards like this.
The Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, has identified 5 main things that cause foodborne illness. Each one could potentially make a customer sick, and it's best to get into the habit of avoiding them right now. They are practicing poor personal hygiene, purchasing food from unsafe sources, failing to cook food to a safe temperature, failing to hold food at a safe temperature, and using contaminated equipment. During this course, we'll talk about these potential causes of foodborne illness. Now, think about the foods you serve or sell in your workplace. What potential hazards can you identify? Spotting potential problems is the first step to preventing these risk factors and hazards.
There are 3 basic types of food hazards: biological, physical, and chemical. Biological hazards are pathogens like bacteria and viruses that can make people sick. They cause the most foodborne illnesses. Some pathogens come from employees, especially if you come to work sick or don't wash your hands when and how you should. Other pathogens are a natural part of food. For example, E. coli bacteria live inside the digestive tract of many animals. They can get on meat during the butchering process and on produce when fields are fertilized with manure. They can make people sick unless you handle food correctly. Many of the food safety rules in this course help keep pathogens under control. Physical hazards are objects that might choke, cut, or otherwise hurt a customer. Pieces of plastic or metal from broken equipment are examples of objects you need to keep out of food. Bones and fruit pits are examples of natural objects you may need to remove from food. Chemical hazards include things like detergents and sanitizers. When chemicals get into food or drinks, they can cause a wide range of problems, from nausea and vomiting to life-threatening internal burns. Be careful not to use chemicals close to or above uncovered food. Always store chemicals away from food and make sure the containers are clearly labeled. Use all chemicals in accordance with their label.
Whenever you work with food or drinks, be careful to avoid cross-contamination. That's when food comes into contact with a hazard and becomes potentially dangerous. Pathogens can easily spread to food from unwashed hands, dirty surfaces and equipment, and even other food. Imagine if you put bell peppers into a container with raw chicken. The peppers could be contaminated with pathogens from the raw chicken. To prevent this, keep different types of food separate from each other. This is especially important for raw animal products and unwashed produce. Contamination can happen when equipment, surfaces, and utensils are not cleaned and sanitized when and how they should be. Pathogens can be anywhere: the counter, knives, cutting boards, you name it. So, if you don't clean and sanitize items before working with food and when needed during use, those pathogens can get into food and make people sick. Food workers can also spread pathogens from their body to food. To help prevent this, follow good hygiene practices. If you don't wash your hands properly after using the bathroom, taking out the trash, working with raw meat, etc., you can contaminate food and surfaces. It's also important not to work with food when you're sick.
Let's see if you can find the food hazards in this room. This isn't the right place for cleaning spray. Let's put it back in the chemical closet so it doesn't drip on food and make someone sick. This isn't good. These little pieces could easily end up in food by mistake, creating a physical hazard. Whoever is working on this should have moved the blender out of the kitchen before taking it apart. You're right. This worker shouldn't touch ready-to-eat food with her bare hands. That can spread pathogens. We'll need to throw away that burger and get the customer a new one. Yikes! That ground beef leaked all over the counter. We're going to have to throw out this tomato. Whenever you work with raw animal products, keep them in a separate space to prevent cross-contamination. Good work. You've found them all.
Some facilities, like daycares, assisted living centers, and hospitals, serve people who are more likely to get sick. We call these highly susceptible populations. They include preschool-aged children, older adults, and people with weakened immune systems. In those facilities, some of the rules are stricter than we teach in this course. If you work in a place like that, you can't serve any raw or undercooked animal products, raw seed sprouts, or unpasteurized juice. You can't touch ready-to-eat food with bare hands, even in cases where it would otherwise be allowed. If you aren't sure if these rules apply to you, or if you have questions about them, ask your manager. Even if you don't have to follow extra rules where you work, be aware that some of your customers are susceptible to foodborne illness. Some of the food safety practices in this course might not seem like a big deal to you, but they can make all the difference for someone with a weak immune system. Based on what you just learned, select all the people who are more likely to get sick from foodborne pathogens. Exactly right. Highly susceptible populations include adults age 65 and older, children younger than 5, and people with weakened immune systems, including pregnant women. These groups of people are more likely to get sick and even die from a foodborne illness.